Three things that I never thought I'd say. Mint chocolate chip ice cream is good. Pineapple belongs on pizza. And Auburn has a lead offensive lineman committed to them.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. It is a Cruton Thursday, and it is a grand Cruton Thursday as we got a commit to talk about. Brian Smith, Locked On Recruiting Insider and recruiting writer at auburndaily.com, hanging out with us. And, of course, our recruiting coverage here is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Brian, the Auburn Tigers pick up a commitment from Carde Smith, the four-star offensive, wait for it, tackle. Another offensive tackle joins Auburn's class. What do you think about Carde Smith and his massive 6'5", 285 frame?
Well, it depends on who you talk to. He might be even bigger. I think he has himself at 6'6", 300 on his Twitter. So
well, let's go by that. Let's go by that.
That's right. He's a kid that can move in space, though. As it always is, feet come first.
Yeah.
If you don't bring your feet, you don't bring the pop. And he can weigh some kids down when he gets to the second level. That's the first thing I noticed about his film. He can get up to the second level and hunt down linebackers. If you're going to play at a higher level of the SEC and not be the guy getting mowed over, you got to have the feet, and he can do it. And then the frame. You can't really teach the length. You really can't teach 300 pounds or 6'6". So yeah. I'll go with that. Finally, he's a kid that's been recruited by a lot of schools. You know, Alabama didn't offer him, but like Florida State, Florida, Miami. Yeah. He's got a ton of offers. This is the kind of player you got to get in state if you're Auburn, especially a Mobile player. That's, you and I have talked about this many times.
Sure.
When Auburn doesn't do well in what city? Mobile? Yeah, they don't do well on the field. That's the city they always have to hit hard, so it's a good pickup for the Tigers.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously a position of need. You and I have been we originally were joking about it to hide the tears and hide the pain, but Auburn has needed offensive tackles for years. And now all of a sudden they're stacking classes. Last year you felt good about Favor Edwin, and then they bring in Seth Wilfred. And now all of a sudden you look at what Auburn has coming in at offensive tackle. We'll just kind of do the whole offensive line here, but Tavares Dice, that other offensive tackle, Carde Smith coming in as well. Both of those guys rated really close to each other when you look at On3's rankings. And then Spencer Dowlin from Athens, Alabama. Then we'll lump in Ty Buster as well, a guy who's rated a little bit lower, but the staff really, really likes Ty Buster. And with a name like that, how could you not be excellent at playing offensive line? But seriously though, Brian, I mean, this group now compared to what Auburn has had, it's early in the process, but as far as top tackle tandems, looking at Carde Smith and Tavares Dice, like, you got to feel good about where you're at.
This is way ahead of the curve for, say, the last 7-8 years, I would say, for Auburn. I can't remember when it was they were good at it.
Maybe longer than that. As far as two top tackles like this, it's been a minute.
And I think Dowlin could possibly play it as well. And as the saying goes, these things will take care of themselves. Once they reach campus, once they reshape their bodies, they'll redshirt for a year, then they'll play. But now you got guys that are younger, that have physical traits that can push the upperclassmen. You're not scrambling to take some kid you just hope is decent out of the portal, because there aren't many offensive linemen that are good to portal. There just aren't. Now, and I'm not trying to be a jerk, but most of the kids that get in the portal from O-line, something's went wrong.
Or they cost like $2 million in NIL.
Yeah, so that's not really worth the bang for the buck. So you got to find the guys at the high school level, occasionally a JUCO kid, and develop. It's every year, though. And that has been by far Auburn's biggest disappointment since I've started covering Auburn. And now it's turning around. Like in a year or so, we'll be able to go to a spring practice and see really good size across the board, more height, more opportunities, more guys can play left or right tackle. And that's something they've sorely needed for a long, long time.
Yeah. So when you look at Carde Smith, I mean, you talked about how he's good in space. He's good getting to the next level. Just kind of give us a bio on, I guess, the running side, the run blocking side of it.
Only thing I didn't like, and this is common with kids, he doesn't extend his arms quite as quickly as he probably should.
Okay.
But once he puts his hands on somebody's chest, good luck.
Got him.
Yeah. He's too strong. He's naturally a bull. and high school kids have very little chance against him. So I don't think he's quite as powerful as Micah DeBose, a guy right down the road from him, but it's pretty close. And if you can get kids like this year after year, redshirt them and develop them, by year 2, they can play a little bit. Year 3, they have a chance to start. And this is what Auburn, like when I was growing up, this is the kind of kid they always had in their lineup.
Right.
Redshirt sophomore starting at guard or tackle that could play and be really good. By the time he left, he was on the draft board for somebody. So that needs to happen again if Auburn's going to consistently compete with the 3 schools I always mention: LSU, Alabama, and Georgia. Those are the 3 most important programs to Auburn historically. And I know the schedule is a little different now, but Texas and Oklahoma moving in, whoever it is in front of them, you need to have better talent in the trenches. And Auburn's not there yet. This is the beginning of the process. Started with Favor Edwin. I think a lot of people are going to like him. I liked him in spring ball, by the way.
Sure.
But this needs to be a 2 or 3 years in a row. Like next year, they need to get at least 2 more that are good. Somebody's going to miss. One of these kids is going to be a bust at one of these classes. You just don't know who. Get as many bullets in the gun as you can. So big, athletic, powerful guys like Carde Smith, I'll take that every time.
How do you see this impacting recruiting the rest of the way for offensive line? You've got 3 offensive tackles. You have an offensive guard now, all committed. Are they done, do you think? Or is this a situation where like you look at the depth chart and like there's a lot of guys on the offensive line that you may lose? And so is this one where they kind of go out and get more guys? Percy Lewis, Jeremiah Wright will both run out of eligibility. And then I think Xavier Miller and Dylan Wade will also run out of eligibility. I think Tate Johnson and Jaden Muskrat may have a COVID year left, but all in all, you're losing a lot of guys on the offensive line to eligibility and or the NFL draft. Is there room for more guys? Or if you're one of these top 2 offensive tackles and they add another one, you're like, hey, what's going on here?
If it's Micah DeBose, you got to take him. Again, another Mobile kid.
Yeah.
If it's a kid that's more of a guard, like Micah could play guard or tackle. If it's more of a guard, it's got to be a dude. Like they got Kale Ellis in the 26 class. He's projected to play center. He's a great player, but this is what I do. And that's fine. Every 2-3 years, you got to take a guy like him. But outside of that, I mean, they need tackles. Tackles.
What about that Broderick Scholl kid from Oklahoma?
That's the one I don't know, because like he's good, but I don't know if he has the same upside as Micah. Like Micah just needs to get in better shape, and that's common. Okay. But man, he could move. Yeah. If there's somebody else, and I'm sure they're trying to get a lot of guys to come visit. That's part of the process. That's great, but they can be picky now. When was the last time you said, you know what, Auburn's going to be picky with their offensive tackle recruiting? Has it happened since you've had this show? Probably not.
No.
So that's the key here. The point that we're even discussing, should they take another tackle, is the most important part of this entire segment.
Yeah, it's like, okay, Auburn has 3. Will they get another offensive tackle? It's like, what is this? What is happening? I'm okay with it, by the way. It's fun. It's fun. Big fan. Big fan.
You should be. Because you're not winning in any league without line play, but in the SEC, you have a chance to be mauled.
Right. Yeah. And it's a situation too, where like, okay, you look at, what Percy Lewis turned into with what he did at Mississippi State, but it'd also just be nice to get a guy like Carde Smith and you turn him into and help him develop into a guy like Percy Lewis with that frame. And you get him his whole career instead of just, the last part of his college career. And I think that's where they're headed, Brian. I really do.
That's exactly what I said. Teams that develop their own talent tend to win more. Kirby and Nick liked doing it that way, and it worked out pretty good for them. So I'm going to go with their recipe. But if you can find a great player in the portal at tackle, you always take them, but there's like 1 or 2 a year.
Right.
You can't rely on it. It's a crapshoot. This is a good sign for Auburn's future, and it's also a good sign that they understand development is the most key part. This kid is not a finished product by any stretch. He's not.
But he doesn't need to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he doesn't need to be right now. Yeah.
Auburn is finally to a place where they can start adding players to the depth chart on the offensive line where it looks like it should. Now, not quite there. It's starting at 25. It will be this year. They need some luck with injuries. Let's not kid ourselves.
Yeah.
But they got some good players, but the depth is iffy. So.
Yeah, they need to stay healthy for sure. Brian, so many variables go into this. As far as development, as far as personnel, as far as the timing of the guys that are older than them and all of that. But is Carde Smith, is he going to be more of a right tackle and then Dice project to the left tackle, or are they both right tackles in your mind and they're going to have to battle it out and maybe one guy will scoot inside? What do you think as far as which side of the line could both these guys be on?
I think Dice is even more athletic. I would try him at left first, but
Sure.
Carde, depending on how he develops, could as well. Dice plays at one of the best programs in the South.
Yeah.
So he's probably a little more advanced in some stuff. And I'm not picking on like Williamson High School down in Mobile, but Langston Hughes won a state title recently in Georgia.
Yeah.
They're pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go with him at left tackle. And Carde, I think, could be a dominant guard because he's a physical kid.
Oh,
But
interesting. Okay.
But it just depends on Dallin. Like again, these pieces will take care of themselves. Dallin's a wrestler. He's a kid that's very athletic as well. Could he play inside? Yeah, he's got that mentality. He's the cowboy that beats up on a bull kind of guy.
Got it.
That's always fun.
Yeah, you want those guys on your team, no question about it.
So where they fall it'll get taken care of.
Yeah. There's a million things that go into it. Just wanted your thoughts on that. So as far as where Auburn looks to next, the portal opens on Tuesday. And how does that impact everything? We discuss in just a moment right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Game Time is the best place to buy tickets, whether it's for sports, whether it's for the theater, whether it's for concert, or if you want to watch some stand-up comedy. It doesn't matter. If you're getting tickets to it, you need to head over to our friends at Game Time. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying any sort of tickets. Look, they really specialize in last-minute tickets. So if you're in the Auburn, Opelika, Lee County, East Alabama area, and you're like, you know what? I'm free tonight. I'm going to drive over to Atlanta to watch the Atlanta Braves. Well, you can buy tickets last minute. You're going to get the best deals thanks to our friends at Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege. That is a new promo code, all one word, LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. The transfer portal, you already hear it revving up. It is about to open, Brian, and we're going to see Auburn guys enter it, and we're going to see future Auburn Tigers come out of it. In your mind, when it comes to recruiting, we're seeing all of these coaching staffs still kind of learn in real time because it's new to us as we cover it. It's new to these guys as they're kind of learning how to maneuver it and the best way to build rosters and to kind of balance the recruiting aspect of it. How do you anticipate Hugh Freeze and the staff balancing transfer portal efforts as well as recruiting from the high school rank efforts?
I think it depends on the position. Defensive tackle, we both know they need help now.
Priority. Yep. Priority.
That's number one on the board. It's not in question. Here's the problem. 99% of the schools are saying the same thing. It's always the biggest problem because you can't teach size. Corner is the spot and not enough kids want to play it, but at least there's bodies. Guys can move over. D tackle, man, that's a thin row. So that's one. They'll take anybody they can get that could help. After that, I think it's really interesting. They need more size at receiver, but it's got to be an experienced guy. It's not a project player. They're hard to find as well. I think it's really going to be picky. They might only take 2 or 3 guys that Auburn fans get excited about and then just a couple depth pieces. Because I really think they want to save the scholarships for recruiting because they've done such a good job. I actually talked about that a little bit on my podcast today, how like Auburn and some other schools have done a better job than some others of figuring it out all the way through, doing their own evaluations and stuff. So I don't think they're going to back off of that. But at the same time, again, if somebody comes in that you just can't pass up, you take them. But this is different than last year. Last year, they were like, okay, what can we get? Like they were a kid in the candy shop with an unlimited credit card because they didn't have enough bodies and they had a lot of spots. The good news is having fewer spots means they're probably in a better spot for 2024.
Yeah, the defensive tackle situation, and Hugh Freeze talked about this after A-Day. He was asked about it, and he said, yeah, with the portal, like we need defensive linemen and we need wide receivers. And I was a little surprised that he just came out and said it, but you can say what you want about Hugh Freeze. Like he's pretty honest at pressers, which I love.
I think it's great. He's probably the most honest guy in the country.
Yeah, it's pretty refreshing. So when you look at that and you hear that, it's okay, I can get on board with you going into the portal and getting, 2 defensive linemen that are part of the rotation. And look, I don't think you just need defensive tackles. I think you need
strong side end at least.
Strong side end to back up Keldrick Falk. If, unless you think Amaris Williams is ready, which he could be by then. You still need the depth, though. I still think you need one,
2
even if
players
Amaris is ready. Yeah, you're right. You're right. And then, the Buck linebacker spot, your edge rusher. Like if something happens to Jalen McLeod, Auburn's defense is in major trouble. And that's what we saw happen a year ago, where it took him a while to get fully healthy. If that happens again, that's very, very bad. And so, if a guy like Brenton Williams were to enter the portal, which I wouldn't blame him for doing, I don't see really his path to playing time anywhere because he's behind McLeod this year. And then you kind of get the feeling that, Joe Phillips and Jamonta Waller are going to jump him in the depth chart, sometime this fall. That's a tough one. And so if you're this coaching staff, I think that should be a priority along with defensive tackle. But man, it's just going to be interesting which route they go with some of these, Brian. Do they go out and get guys that have 1 year left of eligibility in their grad transfer type situation? Or do they try to go get sophomores and juniors or redshirt guys that maybe could have 2 or 3 years left of eligibility? I think that's going to be interesting.
It depends on the players that you brought in, the personalities in the 24 class. Some of those kids will get ticked. You got to know your roster. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Oh, you're 100% right. It's great to sign Amaris. It's another to keep him. You know what I mean? I'm just using him as an example. I don't know the kid. I've never spoken to him.
Yeah, but you replace Amaris and say Malik Blockton, Jamonta Waller, any of these, studs on the defensive line that you got, 100%.
So I would lean more towards a 1 or 2 year guy, not a kid that spent year 1 at Mississippi State and redshirted. I would lean more towards a guy that's played a couple years. Maybe he was a depth piece at LSU. Maybe he was a depth piece at Michigan State, whatever. But he's at least been through college, understands it, and he's been through the weight room. I think that's the better option. Is Auburn going to go out and get a first-round draft pick, kind of like Florida State kind of found their way into with Jared Verse a couple years ago out of Albany? That's probably a once every 10-year kind of deal, but they got to try. They're probably going to end up with some kid from a school. You and I look at each other like, where's that at? There's going to be one of those because some kids just get, developed later. Like Verse gained like 40 pounds after high school. You can't project that.
Yeah, that's insane.
So they need to do their due diligence and be picky.
Yeah, and they've done a good job with guys. I mean, it wasn't this staff, but with what Marcus Harris turned into from Kansas, could they get another guy like Kemp? He didn't have that type of impact that Auburn needs in 2024 from him his first year, but they've done a good job with the defensive tackles, whether it was from Marcus Harris or this last staff when they went out and got, Lawrence Johnson from Purdue and Messiah Nasili Kite from Maryland. Those guys were solid players, and they don't need all SEC players. They just need bodies that can play at an SEC level for up to 30 snaps a game. And I think those guys are going to be available in the portal. The price tag for some of these guys, though, is going to be interesting. And, we're only going to be given so much information. And I'm honestly not going to say those numbers because it's nobody's business. But I do think it's interesting to kind of think how much money these kids are demanding. And you have to pay it because that's the market. If you want any of these kids, you've got to pay it or you're not going to get anybody. And so, how they handle, and we don't know what this is, but how they handle NIL deals over, these next few months, it's going to be wild because you got to keep everybody around and you've got to go out and get guys in the portal and you've got to kind of make sure recruiting stuff is all in line. So this is a very important few months and we won't know who's winning or losing until December for a lot of these guys, but it's just kind of interesting to see how different staffs are going to handle all of these different dynamics that are at play.
Yeah, I don't know if Auburn will go all in because, they're not a national title team. I talked about this on another podcast recently. Do you really go in for the guy that's just going to get you to 8-4, 9-3? Meaning spend $1 million? I would be weary about that. I'd rather bank it and use it in recruiting for a kid that's got 4 years.
Yeah.
That's just my opinion. But you know what? I don't know what's coming down the pipe either. There could be a freshman out there that's still good that's just disgruntled, a coaching change or whatever.
Brian, let me push back on that a little bit because we've talked about this before, and I'm not the only person who said this. Other people have come on the show and said this. But internally, Auburn believes they've got a shot in 2025. So they're a year away. And so if you're Hugh Freeze and you really think that, would it be worth paying more for a sophomore or a junior
that
can
cool.
lead your team in 2025? You know what I mean?
I didn't clarify. I should for a 1 year, just hot and heavy going to the draft.
Yeah,
that guy I think is dumb for Auburn. They're not sniffing a title this year, but they can improve and get better as a program. And those freshmen become sophomores. If the quarterback play works out, and who knows how that goes,
right?
They could be in the hunt for the SEC. And if you're in the hunt for the SEC, you got a chance in the playoff. That's all you could ask.
That's right.
So if there's a sophomore or junior that's really good, that's different. Yeah. So again, what spot does it impact other guys they just recruited? There's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, there is. There is. Is Auburn's best chance to recruit in-state right now? We discuss in just a moment, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. It's playoff time in the NBA and the NHL, or it's dang close to it. And obviously, Major League Baseball is in full swing, pun intended. And of course, FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game. Not only just the game, but the individual players and props and futures and parlays. They've got it all at FanDuel. Right now, new customers, you get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Sounds like it's win or win to me. Bet online with everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all in an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. Brian, you've talked about this in a few different places, but highlighting, this Alabama staff, they're still Alabama. They still got the brand. They still got the money. They still got the resources behind it. But it still seems different. Like there's still differences in this staff with Kalen DeBoer versus what Nick Saban did, which is what we expected. But you're having conversations with some of these recruits, and they're like really solid in-state guys, and they haven't heard from Alabama.
Yeah, I've heard this from people in my side of the world, recruiting guys. I've heard this from high school coaches, and I've heard this with recruits. It's one thing if like one kid is screwed up, like their recruitment is screwed up. Every staff screws up somebody's recruitment. It just happens.
There's too many kids, right?
Yeah, but like I ain't gonna go into a lot of detail here, but like there was a kid that was committed to Bama that they didn't call, that every school in the country had basically offered. He was committed to Bama when they walked in and they didn't call him, so he decommitted. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Like Alabama, a dead dog can recruit to Alabama. It's not hard. But at the same time, they've gotten a few really good players to commit. There's no consistency at all. And the overall theme, and what somebody told me that was the most important piece of intel, Saban had the best back office in terms of everybody knew their role. It all built to the top. And at the end of the year, they would get out of the top 20 kids left on the board overall, they'd get 5 to 8 of them. Like they just killed it in December every year.
Yeah.
The way they're doing it right now, that is not going to happen. They've got some decent commits. I'm not saying they don't, but you can't miss in your own backyard and be a title contender on a consistent basis. And I know DeBoer can coach. He's a tremendous football coach. But I love using this line because there's nobody more credible in our sport than this guy right here. And that would be Mr. Who is it? The guy at Georgia? What's his name? Kirby Smart? Yeah, 9 out of 10 times he said talent beats coaching. Kirby can coach. He's as good as it gets, and he's saying 9 out of 10. So if Auburn consistently out-recruits Alabama, I'll take, and Freeze and his staff are a good staff anyway, I'm going to take them long-term over Alabama. They're screwing up in state. Again, these are different people, unsolicited talking to me, and it's so random. Like, I don't cover Alabama, but because I live in this state and I cover the state, I hear about them all the time, and it's just different. I've never heard this in my life with an Alabama staff, ever.
Yeah.
So what are you doing? Like, how hard is it to recruit Alabama? And Auburn's going to be the beneficiary more than any other school.
Yeah, and they've done well in state so far, and some of these guys that they've lost, but it doesn't sound like they're fully out of it yet. Including, Big Tony, who flipped back to Alabama. It seems like Auburn's still pursuing him pretty hard. So we'll see what happens with guys like that. But I mean, you talked to a bunch of guys that were in town for A-Day, and it sounds like it sounds like Auburn's doing all the right things to put themselves in a situation where when they're in the final stretch in December leading into early signing day, that they're going to be able to make moves and put themselves in situations to land a lot of these guys.
That's the only thing you can do. Right now, it's called March and April were called relationship building, unofficial visits, as many as you can get that gets to the OVs. A lot of these contested recruitments, Carde Smith, Zion Grady, Eric Winters, you name it, there's a gazillion. This is a great year in state for Alabama recruiting, by the way. Auburn hit this right. Alabama coaching change. Auburn's in the second year of their coaches. Everybody knows what they're doing.
Right.
They have an edge. They're taking advantage of it. The kids love the visits. They love the Auburn fan base and everything with the game day visits. Haven't heard a single kid that didn't enjoy his visit. Not one.
Yeah. That's
pretty impressive. So they're going to pay dividends on the back end. I don't know how quickly kids will commit.
Sure.
And I honestly don't care. I care about who signs on the dotted line.
Mm-hmm. Brian, you were on the field for the entirety of A-Day doing pictures and talking to kids and stuff. Your biggest takeaway from A-Day was what?
As a team, it's got a little more talent at certain spots than I thought, and there's some question marks that I didn't know. Like, obviously, there's a certain number 8 that you and I have talked about a few times.
Cam Coleman, unbelievable.
Like that post route, he was right in front of me, and he's catching. I'm like, he's not going to get. Oh wow, he just caught that. You know what I mean? Like he makes that. Like I thought it was overthrown.
Yeah,
his extra gear and stuff. He's their best receiver already, and that should never really be the case at Auburn. But he's probably the most talented receiver Auburn's ever signed. Like he's as freaky deaky as it gets. Just going to say that
he's gonna hold every Auburn receiving record, or a lot of them, when it's all said and done.
The only thing that might hold him back is the class he's in. It's just got a lot of guys, and they might spread it around, which is fine. But the other thing that I loved is the defense really is good at all the run gap fits, and they're in the scheme. They advanced it a lot quicker than I thought. There weren't any busts. Like Cam ran by somebody on that. It wasn't they didn't know what they were doing. He's just faster. Sometimes the better player wins. But defensively, they were pretty good. And I was concerned about the D-line getting into struggle mode. They were pretty good at the goal line and all that. They might be a little better than what I thought. Spring ball had me concerned, but that was the one thing that was alleviated at least a little bit during spring game.
Sure. Brian, how can people check out everything you've got going on?
auburndaily.com and at FBScout_Florida on X.
Yep, there you go. You can read all my written work at auburndaily.com as well. Please like the video. Please subscribe. We'll see you tomorrow. This has been Locked On Auburn.